Today for the reading session is based on how we can preserve the privacy while training the machine learning models. So basically, the essence of this paper has a very prominent application. So basically, what happens is in many since the deep convolutional neural networks have gained a lot of recognition, they are being like in almost every field. So what happens is in many scenarios, you need to train those deep learning models on sensitive data sets. So if you're creating a chatbot system, you need to expose the model to some personal chats of people. If you're creating a medical, a medical image processing model, you need to expose it to medical images, which are definitely going to be private and they cannot be released publicly. And the same happens if you want to classify whether a person has a particular disease or not. You need to provide the model with medical EHR records. So these all kinds of data sets are very private in nature and they cannot be publicly released because the adversaries or like the malicious attackers can make bad use out of it, and it's not good. So while machine learning and deep learning have their own specific uses, like they also have their drawbacks. So I'll explain why. Yeah. So what happens is machine learning models, while learning, the feature representations of the data they are trained on, they inherently encode general patterns. So for example, they learn what kind of features are there in the data set and what kind of representation they should learn. But what happens is instead of learning general patterns, so for example, if you are making a model for predicting whether a person has cancer or not, so what happens is instead of encoding general patterns like patients who smoke are more likely to have cancer, they start learning what instances are there in the data set. So for example, if a person named John Doe has cancer in that data set, so it will learn that a person's named John Doe, a persons who have height and weight corresponding to John Doe have cancer. So basically, they start imitating whatever there is in the data set, and like they learn, like they rote memorize whatever the data they are fed to. So this is not good because uh, models like these can be exploited by malicious attackers and adversaries. They can extract essential information out of it, so they can easily know that John Doe is a person who has cancer, and this data should not be publicly released. So there should be a method by which the models can be trained without any kind of revelation of whether what kind of sensitive data set it was trained on. So by privatizing the learning of ML models, what we achieve two objectives. So basically, the first objective is the training sensitive training data set is not revealed, it is not compromised, and it is safe from adversaries. And the second objective which we meet is that models which are trained using privacy preservation methods, they tend to overfit less and have more generalization associated. So like they, instead of particularization, they have more general approach, and like which is good because they kind of avoid overfitting and like tend to encode general patterns instead of specific patterns. So one approach which this paper has tried to use is the concept of differential privacy. So basically, differential privacy is a framework for evaluating the guarantees provided by a mechanism to protect privacy. So for example, there can be different mechanisms you can use to protect privacy while training the machine learning model. So differential privacy is a framework which analyzes how good the mechanism is, how strong the mechanism is to be exploited by the adversaries. So basically, I'll tell what is the concept of the essence of differential privacy. So let's say you have a model and you are training it on a data set of size n, and then you take a new example, you run an inference of on it, and then you get a prediction, let's say x. And if you train the model on a data set of size n minus 1, and when you run inference on the same unseen example, you get the same prediction. So what that means is inference of a new unknown example should not be influenced by any one particular record. So that particular record was removed from the data set, and still we get the same result. So that means the prediction is not dependent on any one kind of data set or any one kind of instance which is present in the data set. So I can show you visually also about what I mean. So yeah, so for example, in this case, first the data set is trained using 3 examples, and then it is fed into a randomized algorithm, and then we get these answers. So now what we do is we train it on n-1, that is two people. We train it with two descriptions of people, and then we run a randomized algorithm on them, and then we get some kind of answers which are exactly similar. So that means that inclusion or modification or deletion of any one record does not influence the answer which you are getting. So it becomes difficult for the adversary to, from the queries they cannot exploit the fact that this person was removed. So the presence of this person does not affect the answers which you are getting here. So basically, this is what differential privacy presents. So the kind of differential privacy approach which the authors use in this paper is known as PATE, which is the private aggregation of teacher ensembles. So I'll first present a very brief summarized approach of what PATE essentially means, and then we'll dig deeper as we go further. So basically, PATE is a framework which consists of 2 to 3 things. So basically, it consists of a teacher models. It consists of n teacher models which are trained on disjoint subset of data sets. Secondly, it consists of a student model, which is trained using the teacher model. And thirdly, we use random perturbation algorithms on it, to influence the kind of predictions we are getting. And the random perturbation algorithm is what helps in preserving the privacy throughout the training process. Okay, so this is basically an introduction about like what they exactly mean. Like they provide a very brief description, but I think I can cover all of this in the main method which we are going to see right now. Yeah, and one essential thing here is that the PATE framework does not depend on the kind of training which you deploy. So, for example, in this method, there's a training which is involved here, and then randomization algorithm happens here. So the kind of training which you use here is not like does not influence the privacy which you get out of this randomized algorithm. So the way in which the teacher models are trained or the way in which the student models are trained do not affect the privacy, the privacy cost or the privacy budget which you incur while training. So I'll go a bit deeper and like things will start to become clear there. This is basically what they want to contribute. Like these are the objectives. Yeah. So basically, here is the main method about what do they mean by the PATE framework. So yeah, firstly, what they do is, so for example, if you have a particular sensitive data set, they divide that data set into n equal parts, and those parts are disjoint. Like they do not have any kind of record which is common to them. So for example, for now, you can consider an EHR medical record, which is n entries, and which is like, let's say, k entries. And so you divide into n disjoint subsets. So each of the subset will have k by n entries in them, and all of them are independent, and like all of them are disjoint from each other. And for those n disjoint subsets, you use n models. So I'll show you with the help of a figure. So for example, there's a sensitive data set. You divide it into n data partitions, and then you use identical n teacher models. So each of these teacher models will be trained specifically on the data. So example, teacher 1 is trained on data 1, teacher 2 is trained on data 2, and so on. And what happens is, after the training is complete, we can run inference on this whole on these teacher models. And what happens is these n teacher models become an ensemble. So for example, you have trained these teacher models on this sensitive data set, and now you want to run these teacher models on a new unseen example. So you run an inference on an unseen example. You get the predictions out of these n teacher models. Then what you do is you aggregate those predictions into a single prediction. And then after aggregating it, you get a single prediction out of it. So basically, this is what the concept of dividing the data into n partitions, training it using n teachers, and then aggregating the predictions out of each of the n teachers. So this is the the overall concept of the teacher models. Yeah. Then we come to the aggregation mechanism. So as I told that the predictions made by the teacher models on a test example are aggregated. So till now, we have not covered any aspect of how we are going to preserve privacy. So this is where this aggregation mechanism is where the privacy preservation thing really comes into the picture. So what we do is, after aggregating the predictions, we inject random noise to it. So for example, the noise can be sampled from a Gaussian distribution or a Laplacian distribution. So for example, if you're working on a K-class classification example, K-class classification task, and then there are k classes associated. So you will inject random Gaussian and Laplace noise to all those k classes, and like you'll randomly perturb their prediction so that they are not exactly what they should be, and that is by a very small amount. Okay, okay, fine. So I'll dig a bit deeper into this. What I mean. So, for example, this is the jth class. This is the jth class, and you inject a random Laplacian noise to it. So basically, what happens is the higher the gamma is, the lower is the value of the noise injected, and the lower the gamma is, the higher is the value of Laplacian noise injected. So basically, this gamma is also kept track of throughout the whole training process, which I will be describing later. Like it's a gamma is a privacy parameter, and then it is kept track of during the training process. I'll be describing it on it further. So basically, I'll give example of how this goes about. So for example, you have the sensitive data set, you divide it into 4 partitions. And then what happens is, okay, first of all, do you guys have any doubt associated? Any response? Okay, so I'll continue.
Where these teachers are the neural nets, and the aggregate is the probability density function, right?
Yeah, it's like yeah, you can consider that also. Like it's basically the teacher models are small neural networks which are there. They all are identical to each other, and like you get a prediction. So for example, I'll tell you. So for example, there's a binary classification task. Here the prediction which you get is healthy. Here the prediction you get healthy, and here also. And then there's a prediction which is cancerous. You aggregate them. So three votes are for healthy, 1 vote is for cancer. So the percentage of healthy is 75%, and the percentage of cancer is 25%. So this is how the rough aggregation mechanism takes place, if it's clear. And then it can be extended for n classes as well. Is it clear now?
Yes, Bhaiya.
Okay. Yeah, so I was explaining this example. Okay, no other doubts, right? Should I continue? Okay, cool. So let's consider a medical record data set, which is very sensitive. We divide it into 4 parts, and then we deploy specific teacher models for them. Now, what happens is in one of the partition of the data set, there's a person named Jane Smith, and she does not have cancer. Okay, so these teacher networks are trained on a sensitive data set. Now, what we do is we run an inference on an unseen record, but what it turns out to be is that the record is quite similar to Jane's. Jane Smith does not have cancer here, and the record which we are testing is also very similar to Jane's. We run it into these n teacher models. We run an inference, and what we get out is we get these votes out of it. We get the vote of healthy from one teacher, we get cancerous, and so on. We aggregate these votes. So after aggregating, we get that the person is 75% to be healthy and 25% to be cancerous. And what we do is we add Gaussian or Laplacian noise to it, to each vote count, to each of the classes predictions. We perturb the score which we get by some amount of noise, so that yeah. So for example, here you can see it can decrease also, it can increase also. So like the vote for cancer can decrease, the vote for cancer can increase, or it can take place in this way also, as shown in this picture. And the class with the most noisy votes is then selected. So since healthy still has a maximum number of votes, it will be regarded as healthy. So this is how we run inference on the complete teacher model once they are trained on sensitive data set. Now I'll show you one more scenario about what happens is. Let's say that now in the data set you have a person, you have the same person, Jane Smith, but it turns out that she has indeed cancer, and it is reflected in the sensitive data set. So the teacher model which was trained on this partition of data set which showed that Jane Smith had cancer. So this model knows that there's a person named Jane Smith and she has cancer, since the neural networks have a tendency to rote learn all the data set they are fed to. So now what we do is we feed a record which is very similar to that of Jane. We run an inference on all 4 teacher models, and it turns out that there are equal votes for cancer and there are equal votes for healthy. So this is a tie situation. There's no consensus among the teacher votes, and like they're equal votes. So it's equally likely that the person predicted should be healthy or cancer. So what we do is we add Gaussian noise to each vote count. So for example, as you can see, it turns out that the Gaussian noise can either decrease the vote of healthy or it can increase the vote of healthy. So basically what happens is due to the Gaussian noise which is added here becomes a deciding factor about which kind of prediction is going to be made. made. So it is equally likely to be healthy, and it is equally likely to be cancerous. So as you can see in this example, if the adversary was to exploit the queries which he gets here, it is like impossible to come to know that the prediction that Jane Smith has cancer indeed contributed to like whatever vote it got, because here the situation like depending on the noise, it can be equally likely to be healthy and equally likely to be cancerous. So due to these random noise perturbations, what we do is we change the scenario of what the exact situation is like, and then uh, we get situation like this, healthy or cancerous. So I'll also introduce a new concept here, so which is known as a privacy budget. So whenever we run inference on the complete trained teacher models, there's a specified amount of privacy budget which is there, and like it has an upper cap. We cannot exceed that privacy budget while querying. So for example, here you can see here you added noise. So since healthy was already in majority, addition of small amount of noise won't make much difference. The prediction is still the same. So the prediction is not compromised. The privacy is maintained due to the noise. Hence, privacy budget is less because the prediction quality is still the same. So since this query was made using lesser privacy budget, the amount of privacy budget left is still more. Whereas in situations like this, it is very easy for the model to, if we directly give access to the model to the queries like this, it might be easier to know because there are equal votes for healthy, there are equal votes for cancer. So like it will be a bit easy to, the person can shortlist among these two networks, like that Jane Smith has cancer among these two, because the record is very similar to Jane's. Like what adversaries can do is they can put records which are very similar to Jane's in the inference set, and then they can exploit this kind of results. But what we do is we add perturbations to it. But what happens in this case is that the predictions which we are getting are largely influenced by the noise which we had. And as you can see that there's a decrease in prediction quality also, because it's equally like because we are not getting a consensus among teachers, and this is a very it is a very equally likely situation. So the prediction quality here is very bad. Although we are preserving privacy through addition of noise, the prediction quality is very bad. So here in this case, we incur a larger privacy budget, and in this case, we incur a lower privacy budget. Since the consensus was already very high, we incur a low privacy budget. So as we make repeated queries, we will get some situations like this, we'll get some situations like this, and we can keep on making queries until and unless we exhaust the privacy budget which we started with. So this is how inference will take place. So any doubts till now? Kanish, can you please speak out?
Where my doubt is, the ultimate objective of this, of adding the Gaussian noise to the aggregate of all the predictions is to change the predictions a little bit, so that if someone has access to one of those,
Hello,
like,
am I audible?
yes, we are.
Yeah, continue.
So if some adversary has the like, if he can use one of the teacher models to backtrace if Jane has cancer or not, then he will not be able to
Yeah,
predict,
exactly.
because
Exactly.
yeah.
So it becomes very difficult to tell whether the prediction came from this particular teacher or not, because we have added random Gaussian noise to it. Like it is very difficult to backtrace now. Like if we in the case we had used this particular prediction, the teacher vote counts directly. The adversary might use repeated queries in some sort of different ways, and then ultimately he would have known that Jane Smith does have cancer. But in this case, we are completely changing the picture. We are completely randomizing and perturbing the outputs, and then there's no way of knowing that this prediction came from a particular prediction of teachers. So that is what exactly is happening in this case. Is it fine, Kanish?
Yes, we are.
Okay, cool. So it might seem that since the queries which are being predicted are now quite preserved in privacy, they are not reflecting whatever sensitive data set there is on which the teacher models were trained. But still, we cannot deploy this complete teacher ensemble publicly, because although the queries which we are getting are private, they do not reveal any information on the data set. But since adversaries can hack the models, they can download the models, and then they can inspect the individual parameters of these teachers. Now, since these teachers were trained on sensitive data set itself, it is very easy for the person to inspect these parameters and come to know about whether Jane Smith has cancer or not. So this is not basically we cannot use teacher model, that the ensemble of teacher models directly to count the prediction, we cannot expose them publicly to the adversaries. So basically, this is what was about the teachers. Now, since we cannot release the teachers publicly, what we use is we use a student model as well. So basically, we train a student from the ensemble of teachers. So I'll explain the concept using this. Yeah. So what happens is we use unlabeled public data. So there are many medical records which are available and they are unlabeled. They're anonymous, they're unlabeled, and they're public. So to train the student model, we use the unlabeled public data. And what we do is we label these public data using the predictions out of the teacher ensemble. So what we do is for each query, we give one record to this teacher ensemble. We take the predictions are aggregated, they are perturbed, and then the prediction becomes a label for the student model. So in this, like this, the whole unlabeled public data is labeled using the teacher ensemble, and the student model gets trained. Now, what is the benefit is that the student model was never exposed directly to the data set, the sensitive data set which was here. This is only exposed to the teachers. It's not exposed to the student. It is separate from the student. So what we did is we completely trained the student using the predictions made by the teachers. And the predictions which are made by the teachers are already private. Like they preserve privacy due to addition of random noise. So it is a win-win situation for us since the privacy is also preserved. The model parameters of the student network are not exposed to the sensitive data set, and they can be directly deployed and they can be shown to the adversaries as well. So basically, this is the model which will be actually deployed for reference for the adversaries. And there's no way they can know that James Smith has cancer. So because they do not have access to that record. Firstly, they do not have access to that record. And basically, the teacher model is just helping them to guide. They're just transferring all the feature representations they learned to the student in a private manner. So the student model has no way of knowing the parameters are not exposed to the training data set, and the adversary has no way of exploiting this. So now there are two things by which adversaries can exploit the sensitive data set. First of all, they can do repeated queries. So repeated queries was already solved by the teacher ensemble. And secondly, they can inspect the model parameters. So this problem has been solved by the student. So the student is capable of both being robust to both repeated queries as well as inspection of model parameters. And it's completely referentially private, and it can be deployed publicly. And yeah, one more thing. So since this is unlabeled public data, and as I told that there's a limited privacy budget. So privacy budget for things like this incurs a higher privacy budget, and things like this incur a lower privacy budget. So there are very less number of queries of unlabeled public data which we can make before we exhaust the cap of the privacy budget. So what we do is we make use of GANs, the GAN framework. We make use of it, and then what we do is we employ semi-supervised method. Since we have some unlabeled data, we can use a method of semi-supervised learning. And in that way, we can train a large amount of data using the semi-supervised application of the GANs. And this is the approach they follow is this one. So the classifier of the classifier is what the GANs discriminator classifies is. It labels it has k classes. So out of the k classes, the real samples can be placed into the k classes, and there's one more class which represents whether the sample is fake or real. So there are k+1 classes, and through the method of supervised learning, you can repeatedly query all those, and then you can fill them, and this way you can increase the amount of data on which the student was trained. Principle of semi-supervised learning. So yeah, so since this whole approach was quite intuitively presented, they have also backed the approach using some mathematical proofs. So I'll not go into very detail because they are quite involving and it can take a lot of time to explain them. But in brief, I'll explain about what they essentially mean. So they prove that differential privacy indeed is a strong standard. It helps in preserving privacies to a large extent. So as you can see, as I told before, here they prove that the inference or the result which is obtained on an unknown sample is not influenced by any one particular record in the training data. So whether one record is deleted, whether it is modified, or whether it is included, the results will still be the same, and that is why that's what makes the machine learning models to be differentially private. And as I was talking about the privacy budget here, that there's an increased consumption of privacy budget and there's an decreased consumption of privacy budget. The privacy budget is live tracked by the moments accountant. So there are different types of moments accountant which are there. So for example, there can be a moment, there can be any differential accountant, and like there are many kinds of that, and like they are able to track whatever privacy budget is there, and they ensure that the cap of the privacy budget is not exceeded, because once that exceeds, the training altogether stops. Okay, so this is all kind of math things, like they prove to, like they show to prove their theorem. I won't go much deep into this. So I'll come directly to the results part. So they present results in two stages. So in first stage, they just evaluate the performance of the teacher ensemble. So they just run their inference on this particular model just to test how robust the predictions of the teacher models after perturbations are. So they make use of the MNIST dataset and they make use of the SPHN dataset. And what happens is, without any kind of differentially private learning, like they do not use this kind of framework, they just train using a single model. They get 99.18% accuracy on the MNIST dataset and 92.8% test accuracy on the MNIST dataset, on the SPHN dataset, sorry. And next, what they do is, 1 minute. Yeah, okay. So next, what they do is, they run the inference in this differentially private construction of the teacher models, and the scores which they are getting out of this trained and after the random perturbation is that they get 93.18% for MNIST and 87.79% for SPHN. So although there is a significant drop of accuracy from, let's say, 99.18% to 93.18%, but the kind of privacy preservation which we are getting, like we are getting good privacy bonds of it, like our sensitive data set is not exposed to adversaries. 93.18% is a very good, a good performance for the data set, even if there was a lot of random perturbations involved. So I think this decrease in accuracy is largely compensated by the amount of good and strong privacy which we are getting by utilizing this method. Okay, and then there's this graph which is very important. So this graph essentially shows that how the accuracy or the prediction accuracy will change as a function of the noise which we are injecting. So as I told, that noise depends on the inverse of gamma, that is noise is Laplacian distribution of 1 upon gamma. So since as gamma is more, there is less noise injected. As the gamma is less, there is a very large noise which is injected. So after a certain point, like let's say if you take gamma equal to 0.1, there's not much change in the prediction accuracy, even if you decrease the noise. So here the noise is continuously decreasing. Here the noise is the largest. And I think if we can sample random noise from 0.1 to 0.2, we still are getting pretty good results. So this is what is showing that even by using large amount of noise, we are getting results which are equal to those obtained using less amount of noise. Okay, so yeah, so one more good result which is very important is they analyze the performance of the student model, which was trained using the semi-supervised method of the using the GAN framework and the unlabeled public data. So when it is trained using this whole framework, we get an accuracy of 98% on MNIST and 90.66% on SPHN, which is like very good accuracy given that we are preserving privacy also at the same time. So as you can see, this is an exhaustive comparison of all the data sets. And epsilon delta is basically the differential privacy, the parameters of differential privacy, and like the constraint on what kind of budget we can. They put an upper bound on the privacy budget which we can expand, and these are the queries which we make to train the student model. So since the unlabeled public data needs to be trained, we need to make repeated queries to the teacher model again and again, and these are the maximum number of queries which were made to the teacher ensemble. And these are the non-private baseline when this method was not adopted. It was trained simply using the CNN. These were the accuracies which we got, and these were the accuracies which we got after the whole framework was deployed, the whole privacy preservation thing was deployed, and like the results are pretty good. Like there's not much difference, hardly 1 to 2% at the max. There's a decrease in this one because we are like I'm not sure. I think the SVHN dataset might be difficult because the non-private baseline is also very less. But the other baselines, the student accuracy is at par with the non-private baseline. So it's a win-win situation, I guess. Yeah, I think this is all for this paper. Do you guys have any doubts regarding this?
Are these is this approach applicable to various regressive predictions, or is it applicable only for where we know that output would be only from 1 to n classes or something like that?
No. So like I said, the training of the teacher ensemble and the student ensemble does not depend any way on which the type of method you are using. So if you want to use other approaches, like if you want to generate images also out of that in a privacy preservation way, it is very possible to use this method. So basically, the method which is being used to train the teacher models does not hold much significance in this framework. What holds significance is that the perturbations which we are adding and the privacy budget which we are incurring during the whole training process. So this is basically what is important, that the type of training which we are doing to train the teacher models or to ultimately train the student model is not very, it is agnostic to the kind of training which you want to do, like kind of method which you want to apply. So here also they provide one statement. I will show you. Yeah, so finally, here as you can see, learning strategy and privacy analysis do not depend on the details of the machine learning techniques used to train the teacher or the student. So basically, they're agnostic to these kind of techniques. I hope this answers your question.
Like, but in the case of regressive predictions, like
Okay.
won't it change by adding some noise? Won't change the prediction very largely? Like here
Yeah.
in the case of classification, only probability is changed a bit. But in that case,
So for example, if you're from a regressive point of view, if you say like most of the predictions which are positive, you're getting them as from like say 40 to 50. Okay.
yeah,
And there's a negative prediction which comes in the range of 20 to 30, something like 25
yeah.
points, something like that. So so in that case, we can use a method of averaging. So since the 50 to 60 are more in number, addition of small amount of noise won't make much difference. The prediction will still favor to, the prediction which is made between 15 to 60. I know that the noise can be large, but then the amount of noise which can be injected is controlled using these epsilon delta parameters.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So the noise which you are injecting is dependent on the epsilon delta. So this is what creates an upper bound on what amount of noise you are injecting and what is the privacy budget you are going to keep on that. So as you can see, if the predictions of the teacher models are like mostly like the same, I know the regression can vary a lot. The prediction, the final results of the regression experiment can vary a lot, but then I think after averaging them out and aggregating it, addition of a small amount of random noise should not make much difference to the model if the teacher models are trained well on the sensitive data set.
Yeah, that makes it clear.
Okay. Any other doubts from you guys?
Excuse me, Bhaiya.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a doubt. In cases where we have insufficient data set size to train a model, we'll sometimes join it with a larger model, right? So which we feel that will share features which will have same type of learnable features. Then you append the smaller data set with a larger data set. So when we are doing applying this framework to such cases. And when we're dividing that data set into smaller parts for each teacher.
So the data set which you want to divide is still sensitive, right? Okay.
I mean, we'll still have the small data points, right, in the joint data set.
Okay, so what you're saying is you want to do a transfer, you want to transfer the feature representation of a model which is learned on same kind of data set, and then you want to run, you want to join it with you want to cascade it with this framework, right? This is what you're asking?
No. When we have a smaller data set, we'll sometimes join it with a bigger data set, right? So like we will have same type of features.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah, and then when we are dividing that data set into smaller data, and then when we're using this, then won't those predictions get eliminated as outliers?
Yeah, that can happen. So for that, I'll suggest a remedy for that. So what you do is, even though the data set is small, you first train the teachers from it. You just train the teachers from the small sensitive data set, and while training the student, you can use those here. Like, since they're anyways not, are you considering the large data set to be private or not? I think you're not considering them.
No,
to
no,
be
just
private.
a small data set. Yeah.
Okay. So since these are not anyways private, we can train the student model from this. And
Okay,
since
okay.
we can make this whole process end-to-end trainable. So basically, we are injecting the larger data set here, and like the whole data set gets trained in this way. If you are to train it end to end, because yeah, you are right. Like it can it can discard the predictions, the important predictions which are there for the smaller sensitive data set when combined with the larger data set. But then I'll suggest that you can use a smaller data set only for training these teacher models, and while training the student model, since the data set is almost similar, I think you should get good predictions out of the teacher model as well. Since our main
Yeah.
aim is to preserve the privacy of the private data set only, I'll prefer that this is completely, that thing is not it's meant like the whole private data set just is before the student, it's not exposed to this. It does not reduce when it is trained with the teacher model, when it is trained with the large data set on the teacher model.
Okay, Bhaiya, thank you.
Okay. Any other doubt from you?
Can you touch upon again on how the semi-supervised learning work and how much data the author has used quantitatively?
Okay. I think, I'm not sure if they have provided. Yeah, okay, they have provided here. So as you can see, I think this paragraph is what they want to prove. So yeah, so out of 9,000 samples, they use either 100, 500, or 1,000 samples only to train this. They make repeated queries to this aggregation of teacher models, and the rest 8,000 samples are trained using the semi-supervised method. If we take 1,000 samples at max to which make repeated queries to this teacher aggregation, the rest 8,000 are there for teaching, for semi-supervised learning of the student model.
Okay, great. That's great.
Yeah, and still, as you can see, the accuracies are still very good. Like there's
Yeah.
hardly a difference of 2%. Good.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, sure. Anything from you guys? So Shant, Kanishka, Kshatrish?
Bhaiya, how do we label the unlabeled data?
Yeah, so basically there's a technique which is known as semi-supervised method. So what happens is that is done using GAN. So for example, the discriminator of the GAN also acts like a classifier. So what you can do is, so in unsupervised methods, the discriminator basically tells whether an object is, whether a sample is real or fake. But in the case of semi-supervised learning, what the discriminator of GAN does is, it apart from telling whether the sample is fake or real, it also classifies them into K classes. So there are in total there are K plus one predictions. The first K predictions are for labeling the class to which it belongs, and the last prediction is for telling whether the sample is real or fake. So basically, this is how the entire learning process takes place for semi-supervised learning. So this is how they leverage the use of 8,000 additional data set without making much repeated queries to the teacher ensemble, so that the privacy budget is still not, it does not go off cap.
Right, Bhaiya, right.
Okay. Anything else on the side? Okay, then I think we can conclude the meeting if there are no doubts. Cool, I had a great time with you. Well, bye guys.
Thanks.
Bye.